All right, you coming in? Oh, it's okay. Bienvenue à the office and welcome. We're bilingual, you know, we're bilingual. All right, oh, hi, Terry. Hey, Terry, how are you? Andy, come on. We've gathered all the chairs we have and we sort of pulled them away from the table so everybody can fit. There may be some standing, but we're definitely over capacity, so please come on in. No chair here.
Could you lower the blinds because right now you're just this ominous silhouette.
We don't want to read into that. Is that better? Is that the right height? Another. I don't know, not too much light. Is that working? Sure. All right, great. Well, welcome everybody. I intend to do a lot of listening this morning, and I can share some thoughts too if you would like that. But really, I'd like to focus on hearing what you have to say about Wednesday's news, and I presume that's why you're here. Okay. Anyone would like to start?
Yeah, sure. I'll get it started. Thanks for agreeing to meet with us. And I should say, you know, we just decided 3 minutes ago that I would try to give some opening statements to gather everybody's point of view, but we all just met moments ago as well. So.
Met each other personally for the first
yeah,
time? Or, oh, very interesting, okay.
But I guess like the one kind of obviously the unifying thing that brought us together is a deep sense of dissatisfaction with the direction that the government has decided to go with respects to electoral reform. And I think, and please jump in if I'm misrepresenting anybody, but I think that we feel that there was like a deep sense of kind of cynicism from the government about the perpetual ways in which electoral reform was touted as a major thing. And then since election, just kind of been this gradual rolling back of the significance of it, and in some sense even suggesting, the Prime Minister suggesting that because it is a new government that is, I think, objectively better than its predecessor, that these issues are somehow not as significant, and that's certainly the way that I think a lot of voters are feeling right now. And I think that the government is significantly underestimating, underestimating how important the structural reforms for democratic renewal actually were to the people who voted Liberal, many of whom perhaps might not have voted Liberal, and many of whom perhaps won't vote Liberal in the future on that issue. So, I mean, perhaps if folks would like to jump in with other personal insights, I think that in a general sense is what brought us together and decided to come and share those views with you and see what you think.
It was supposed to not be business as usual. And yesterday I saw 2 minutes of 10-second clips of the Prime Minister saying, this is the last time we're going to do this. And when you look at it, you say, of course you're not going to do it because it's not to your advantage. And that makes the new boss seem like the old boss. And that's really disappointing.
And it's not just, I mean, we're focused here on electoral reform, but it seems like it's part of a trend of going back on certain important promises. Like, to me, the big one was nation-to-nation relations with Indigenous people, and I see it as related. This fact that now that a new, shiny government is in place, that these problems are no longer as relevant. But I don't want to detract from the issue at hand, but I just wanted to show that it's not just as one isolated issue, it's just this one is a particularly unifying structural pan-Canadian issue, I think.
I'm kind of curious, like, these are all arguments I agree with, but I assume you read the news and you've heard similar arguments made and have considered them. I'm sort of curious how it, what you think of this. I mean, obviously you're part of the government, so that is, you know, we kind of know what the on-paper answer is, but in terms of, like, your parliamentary secretary now, was this something you knew about coming into the job? Are you comfortable with it personally and as someone who ran on that commitment?
None of us knew what the direction was going to be in that. Well, the minister arrived the day before, the morning out, but none of us knew what was going to be in that letter until Wednesday. The story of electoral reform is a long one. I mean, and to fully acknowledge the Liberal Party had elements of its campaign that were about electoral reform, and we spoke broadly about it. The then candidate Trudeau spoke broadly about electoral reform, including many things, improving access to the vote and cleaning up the campaign and party funding, electronic and e-voting, voting overseas, repealing the distasteful or undemocratic elements of the Fair Elections Act, and yes, changing the way we cast our ballots was part of all that as well. But the platform was also really clear about creating an all-party committee and about engaging with Canadians. And I know Mark in the room, I think more than anybody, but Mark, you know that my career in public engagement in city planning before was a long one. And the thing about public engagement is when you go to the public, you have to be ready for what you hear, whether it's what you expected or not. And you have to, if you're going to do it authentically, you have to be ready to act on it and carry out what you hear. And I don't have any doubt that there are communities, geographic communities, and communities of interest in Canada that have a clear preference for one system of casting ballots over another. And sometimes that's proportional representation, and sometimes that's first past the post, and sometimes it's everything in between. Consensus emerged in pockets. But broadly, as is government's job to look broadly across the country, I believe there was not consensus, and I think the confusion in the ERRE, the committee report shows that. The results from MyDemocracy.ca show that. The experience of individual MPs, including me in my town hall, show that.
I think I was at your town hall, Mr. Fillmore, and there was a clear preference for proportional representation expressed in that town hall. That was certainly my sense. The other issue I'd like to raise with you in terms of what you've just said, yeah, there was a supposedly commitment to public engagement, but I don't think that really was followed through. It was started in the summer when people were otherwise busy and engaged with other things. I don't think the government put their heart into public engagement. Yes, you had a town hall. It wasn't mandatory for every MP, as far as I know. The MyDemocracy.ca was a travesty in terms of any kind of survey to reveal preferences. It was a very biased survey, leading people to answer in certain ways. And I don't think the minister was into it. I don't think the only good thing, as far as I can see, it came out of it was the committee report, which has not been taken seriously. And to say that, well, there wasn't agreement, that's probably true, but the government at this point, but the point is, if the government is committed to engagement, public engagement, as you know, as somebody who's been engaged in this kind of activity before, you do put more resources into it, you can put more time into it. And maybe there wasn't time to proceed for the next election, according to Elections Canada, but, you know, the minister, as was mentioned on the at-issue panel last night on the National, if you watched it, two of the people pointed out, well, that, you know, the Prime Minister could have announced and said, we don't have agreement, but we will be going forward anyway, and we'll make a commitment at least for the next election. So I don't really feel that the government, and the other part of my cynicism is that because people didn't opt for the particular version of a different system that the Prime Minister wanted, which was the preferential vote system, which would have ended up with as most experts say, would have ended up with a larger Liberal majority. Because people didn't opt for that as their first choice, he took his marbles and went away. That's my reading of the situation. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the kind of analysis that is underlying a lot of the cynicism, probably in this room, but certainly amongst young people.
Yeah, I do social science for a living, and I did a master's in social science, and I would just echo your comments about the MyDemocracy.ca. There was no way that survey could have developed a consensus. So when you look at it in retrospect, it seems like everything was set up to suit the government's preference, which was exactly that, for preferential ballots. Consensus is not an appropriate way, like, there's no real issue in Canada that Canadians have consensus on. So consensus is not, we don't vote by consensus. We don't do anything by consensus in this country. So getting consensus is just impossible, especially with the means used. And I think in this room there's a huge sense of betrayal, because now it looks like when the Prime Minister made unequivocal promises about this being the last election on first past the post, that amplifies that sense of betrayal. So my question to you is, do you share in our sense of betrayal by the Prime Minister about this decision? Because it is serious betrayal for me, and I think many people in this room.
I understand and honor the strong feelings that this group has, and many other groups in geographic areas across the country have for your preferred method of casting ballots. I really do, but I am agnostic as to what the community tells me when I walk into a community engagement session. Whether it was my own, and the record is on my website, you can see the diversity of opinion in that, or whether it's the national effort. Now, the mydemocracy.ca took a different approach. It got to values. Why? Because it was clear through the work of the committee and the town halls that Canadians, by and large, your group and groups like yours excluded, were not ready for a discussion about changing. Don't largely understand, or are not even interested in understanding PR or ranked ballots.
But that's the work.
Wouldn't it be your job?
I want to push back on that a little bit. So, Dave Meslin of Free the Vote Canada has said the Prime Minister has made the right decision by pulling back. And he goes on to say the reason that he's made the right decision is because Canadians in the large numbers are not ready for this, because it's not as the way that school curricula are organized, because of the way community activism has been organized. And his point, and you probably read his article, says that this needs to start in communities, at the community level, built from the bottom up, and not the top down by some dictate as a result of a countrywide engagement process that didn't show consensus, as much consensus as there might be in this room. There is not.
By that logic, though, and I'm friends with Dave, and we have this argument all the time. By that logic, if we took the same approach to driving a car, we'd all have to be mechanics before we could get behind the wheel of a Ford Focus. And there's no reasonable reason why Canadians need to know the Gallagher Index, need to know the complicated math behind how we do the calculations that would give us a parliament and a PR system. We do need to be able to have a government that is responsive, and I think this exercise really demonstrates how it is not necessarily responsive, and in fact, with such a system that divides us so easily, it's easy for the government to say, we can't figure out what Canadians want, we don't have consensus, we can't go forward. Nothing else has a consensus threshold. Quebec can leave Canada with a clear majority, but not a consensus. You, as a government, got elected with 39%. Nothing close to consensus. When we stalled there, we could say, we don't have a clear enough mandate to have a government, so I guess we'll have no government at all. It just seems like it was never said at any point until like midway through this process that consensus was the threshold we were looking for.
It was presented as a top-down thing. Trudeau said, this is going to be it, and you will vote for me because I will bring this in. And it wasn't just one thing on the platform among many, it was the centerpiece of electoral reform.
It's embarrassingly transparent that because this does not serve the Liberal government, it's being backtracked. And it's embarrassing.
I can tell you too, as a political scientist and a historian, people don't understand the first past the post system either. And we've been using that for a really long time.
Yeah.
Well, the first past the post system is coming top down.
Yeah.
So, you really can't compare them like that. I mean, top down, we're told this is what our voting system is.
It's literally feudal. That's the origins of first past the post.
And the mydemocracy.ca, I gave up in the middle of it. There was absolutely no way that I could transmit what I thought would be a good voting system through that. And I just gave up because I thought, I don't know, if I continue with this, I don't know what my little voice is going to be construed as saying. It was horrible. It was so biased. It was like, would you like this, despite the fact that it's going to cause this, and this bad, outcome. Well, no, I don't think it's going to cause that bad outcome. So, you know, you're telling people, and I mean, I know a little bit about it, people that don't really know anything about these other voting systems are gonna say, oh, well, if we do this, it's gonna cause that bad outcome. You're telling them that this is a bad system in the survey.
And for all its flaws, it still showed that the majority of Canadians are ready for coalition governments that work together, that aren't majorities, that our preference is not a Liberal majority forever. And that's what a ranked ballot would give us in our current breakdown of politics. Canadians are ready for cooperation in the government and working together for our better interests.
Yeah, I really feel like that also was reflected in a lot of the town hall meetings and the RRP meetings. You know, from the numbers I saw, it seemed like a large number of the experts that spoke and people coming up afterwards were saying they wanted proportional representation. So I don't know what the
During the election, consensus was not an issue. During the election, consensus wasn't even mentioned. The election promise was, we are going to change the system.
This
It
is going to be
not-
the last
this is-
election where the first past the post system was the promise.
And my guess is, at the next election, you will not look at this moment as your shining moment of your government. It will be an embarrassment.
And you know,
Of course.
and the added thing to this too, I mean, at least for my part, so I was living in Ottawa prior to coming here for the last 10 years, and amongst all the different groups of people, all the subsets of people, all the people who came to Ottawa and talked, the one consistent thing that everybody was talking about, particularly people under the age of about 40, there were two issues that this government promised that were made that were really enticing to everybody. The first was renegotiating nation-to-nation relations, and the second was electoral reform. And those are the two issues among all the other issues that the government has totally seemed to turn its back on. And when you think about the sweep that you all got in this election, you know, you're not going to get that with these kinds of policies next time around.
And that sweep was built on the promise of this because it drew away votes from the NDP and the left side of the political spectrum that would benefit from an every vote counts electoral system. So you drew them in, gained this massive majority, and now because it doesn't serve the Liberal government, you walk back the promise.
And you ran left of the NDP, I'll give you that. That was an interesting, but without going, but you're not delivering on it. You know what I mean? So if you run left and you run on reform, you have to deliver on it.
Well, it won't be the first time the Liberals have done this, I have
Right.
to say, if you know your history, but anyway.
And I mean, my son is saying the exact same thing. He's, you know, in his late 20s, and he was saying there's a lot of young people that voted Liberal, and even people that had never voted before, and because of this, like, it was a really, really central issue, and
I mean, in this riding in particular, I mean,
Yeah.
there weren't too many people who were unhappy with Megan Leslie, and
yeah.
you know, it's no insult to you, but if Harper hadn't been there, and if people hadn't thought, you know, this is the last time we have to hold our nose and do this, I don't know if we'd be.
I really disagree with that assertion that Canadians, people who are getting into voting, aren't educated enough to make the decision about what kind of representation. At the time of the election, I was teaching adult education classes, and many of my students hadn't participated in the electoral process before, and they were asking me questions about how does it work, and what are the changes going to happen with the new government. And one of the main things that I could tell them positively about the Liberal Party was that this ridiculous system that I explained about first past the post, which even they, with no education before about it, could see was a ludicrous system that was missing out on so many opinions from different Canadians. And and one of the main things that I could tell them positively about the Liberal Party was that this ridiculous system that I explained about first past the post, which even they, with no education before about it, could see was a ludicrous system that was missing out on so many opinions from different Canadians. And they loved the promise of the Liberal Party to change this. And these people were educated enough to make this kind of decision, and they made that decision with so many other Canadians.
Well, I mean, also, I mean, I went to your town hall as well, and I mean, I did come in late, but in our group, we talked about the fact that a lot of people didn't really understand, and I was actually really surprised, people who would come hadn't done, more preparation or reading or something, like, well, what really is proportional representation, what is a ranked ballot? So, an educational, campaign before an actual, well-designed survey would have been great. And then people, then the government would have made an effort, okay, here are some of the various options. Here's what it means. What do you think? Like, if they were really serious, I'd say they would have done that. And then had a more educated population.
Yeah, instead of being like, do you understand this, and this about electoral reform? See, you don't even understand it.
And people do this all over the world,
Right.
right? Like,
It's
I
not
Canadians aren't
uncommon.
dumber than everybody else.
I think if instead of giving the announcement through a mandate letter for a new minister that had barely just taken on her job to actually go and have to defend this decision, if instead of doing that, he had the guts to get up and announce, well, we're going to fund a council of something, a council that would actually do the work that you said hadn't been done. In other words, educate people about the electoral system, about politics in general, about government, how governments work, and so on and so forth, including electoral reform in that mandate, then we might believe him. We might believe him. So there were other options than just pulling the rug and saying, no, we're not going to do this anymore.
During a time of incredible other news items that were happening, where perhaps the idea was we can slip this in because there's all kinds of crap happening in the world, and people realize, as do I, that there are bigger issues than this.
I just say on that point too, there are other issues in the world. Somebody wrote to me and said, oh, maybe he pulled the rug because of what's happening down south. I wrote back and said, no, actually, he should have gone ahead because of what's going on down south. That is surely a lesson in what we need to do in this country to protect our democracy, to build it up, to strengthen it, not to increase cynicism, as this decision seems to me will do.
Well,
If we have a more representative government, then maybe we can, have more ability to deal with these really hard issues by all of us cooperating.
Where there were many learnings from the process that was undertaken over the last year, but one of them, to your point, was that one of the things we learned from all that was that there was a long list of things that are important to Canadians right now, and electoral reform is on it, but it's well down the list. It's 10:30 or so today, I met with Autism Nova Scotia, Canadian Mental Health Association, Lang House, Schizophrenia Association of Nova Scotia. Later today, I'm meeting with an employer who's trying to work hard to keep 10,000 jobs in the Halifax region. There are a lot of things that are important to Canadians: the economy, your health, aging, and in a fair assessment, electoral reform is well down the list, not in the top 10.
How about we call it strengthening our democracy?
I beg your pardon?
How about we call it strengthening our democracy? I bet in another 3 months, when we've had 3 months of the government down south, you get a completely different reaction to that whole idea of really strengthening Canadian democracy.
But I think that's an important point you're making, though. It's not the most important issue. Lawrence Lessig, who works on campaign finance in the States, has a really good line that says, democratic reform is not the most important issue, but it is the first issue we have to deal with. And if you look at PR democracies, the magic of PR is that you get you get a public policy that is far closer to the median public opinion and public values than you would in any other system. So it's actually making the job of parliamentarians easier because it involves less guesswork about what Canadians really want and gives you a mechanism to make Autism Nova Scotia happy, to make all these other interest groups, or find the place that most Canadians sit at. And it's in the same way that Canadians are really frustrated that it takes a long time to get from one place to the next place, but if you're proposing like a high-speed rail system and you're like, well, we're not concerned about high-speed rail, we're concerned about getting from one place to the next place really quickly, you have to step in. There's a public educator role for an MP that's goes well back to the first Parliament, that we need MPs to step in and play the educator role and not just the kind of football of whatever's popular role.
Yeah, it's not really fair to compare it with other issues as if they're all on the same plane. It's more of like a meta issue. It's like and, you know, how our democracy works, how collaborative governments are, how much representation there is of people is something that affects all the other issues and how they're going to be dealt with.
And to be fair, it wasn't down the list in the campaign.
Right.
It was like the number
Yeah.
one issue in the campaign. So, and then you got elected with a majority. So, I mean, that's a pretty clear message.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people hear what they want to hear in the campaign. The campaign was also largely about families with children, was largely about the middle class, and was largely about the economy as well. I wouldn't prioritize.
But how many
any one of those
times
issues
did he
above
get
the
up on his hind legs in Parliament and say, this will have been the last election that is first past the post? He put it out there, right out front, constantly. So, don't
Yeah,
talk about how it's just one of many things. It was a centerpiece.
because every party talks about strengthening the middle class, and every party talks, I mean, those are good things, so don't get me wrong. But the flagship issue is the one that he chose, like, you know, it's a newsworthy one, it's a great one that everybody's gonna be focusing on.
It was very soundbitey.
Super soundbite.
And it drew a lot of voters that probably will not vote Liberal again.
Absolutely.
If this stands.
You mentioned that the minister just found out about it the day before. I imagine you would have found out at a similar point. What, I guess, I'm guessing we're getting close to the end of our meeting, so I'm just curious, like, what do you do from here, and how does this, I guess, is there any hope for it at this point? Like, do you have intentions to bring it back to the minister in any meaningful way?
So I have two jobs. One is Andy, the parliamentary secretary, and one is Andy, the MP, right? So Andy, the parliamentary secretary, is going to be helping the minister to execute the mandate letter, which is the other elements of democratic reform, repealing parts of the Fair Elections Act, access to voting, and all those other good things that are absolutely essential to strengthening democracy in Canada, and like we're moving ahead on. But also this very real and emerging cybersecurity threat, where we just witnessed the unbelievable potential for destruction in the United States when there's not good cybersecurity. So that's my job as PS. My job as MP is to always listen, and to always carry the message of my constituents back to the relevant minister, whether in this case it's democratic institutions or whatever the issue is, and I'll do that faithfully.
So there's no part of your current job as secretary to raise this issue again with the minister? I mean, how does she feel about it? She seemed to be quite on board with the issue. I know she's very new and very young, but sounded as though she had a commitment to electoral reform and proportional representation in particular. So how does she feel about it? Will she have a voice to actually express some concerns that have been around the room? I don't know what's happening in the rest of the country. Maybe there are other meetings going on like this. I don't know. Will you be able to bring the issues we've raised here to her attention?
Yeah, I always will do that as the MP. I would never put words in her mouth, but it is, I can tell you that it's cabinet's and the Prime Minister's position,
Yeah.
what we know, what the position is, that Canadians don't want it.
And I guess in other organizations, the two hats role you described is often phrased as conflict of interest. Is that, do you feel conflicted at all?
How do you conclude that Canadians do not want this?
Agreed.
Was it the survey? My career was as a statistician, and I spent my career creating valid surveys. That was not a valid survey. Have Statistics Canada have a look at it. If you don't take away all their money, as happened under the Harper government.
So 360,000 people responded to the survey, 160 town halls, meeting of the committee in every province and territory, and meeting a round table discussion with the previous minister in every province and every territory. All of that is where it
Oh, so you are concluding that the survey was valid? Are you? You're concluding that the results from the survey
I'm not
are
gonna
worth
argue with
listening
the
to.
statistician about the.
Well, yeah, but you just told us, the survey was one of the things that influenced, then you're incompetent. I mean, the government is incompetent. They
And on the
don't know
survey-
how, they don't know how to collect information from
On
the
the
public.
survey, for the question that asked if Canadians wanted electoral reform, how many Canadians answered yes or no? Well, we don't know because that question wasn't on the survey. And that means that that survey was not done in good faith, and that means that all the campaign promises are a complete betrayal. And I feel so bad for poor Miriam Monsef, who was thrown under the bus. And if we want to talk about new boss, same as the old boss, that was conservative MO, like through and through. And that poor woman was thrown under the bus. And she was a new MP. And you're a new MP as well. And I worry about that and how you're going to be played in this. And you have a right, you have the responsibility to represent us. And what we're looking for is for you to say that you're going to represent us. More than just the MP, more than just that. We want leadership on this issue. We want someone to say that breaking promises, the Prime Minister breaking this promise, is wrong. And there's no justification. It's well established there's no justification to say that Canadians don't want electoral reform. 3/4 of Canadians who voted for parties that promised electoral reform. So there's overwhelming evidence that Canadians do want electoral reform. It was central to the Liberal platform, and now it's being backtracked. And that is embarrassing and shameful. And may it not be forgotten.
And there is a Liberal MP who said, you know what, this is a bad idea to backtrack on this. Are you prepared to say that?
I have been doing public engagement for 2 decades. And like I said, I am agnostic when I walk in the room. And I did not hear consensus in my own town hall, and I did not see consensus in the report.
So what do you
It wasn't
believe?
What's your
consensus,
threshold for
but there
public
was a
engagement
heck of
before
a
you got
lot
to this
of,
job?
I would say the
Is it
majority
consensus?
was.
Like, when you walk into a room for public engagement, you have to make a decision if you're a city staffer or whatever role you're in. I'm guessing council was not always looking for consensus, or the groups you were working for weren't always looking for consensus, were they?
I would say probably yes. I'll tell you a little. I'll compare an experience. So when I was leading the downtown plan, and that plan went to council in 2009, HR by design. We had a poll that was done by somebody else, some third party, that said. By the way, that plan had some controversial elements. It allowed for tall buildings. It allowed for development next to heritage buildings. But that plan had 80%, 82% approval of the community. That's why I had confidence taking it to council and recommending it. If it had 40% or 12% approval, I would have had a different approach, absolutely. But in the end, that plan was successful because it had the broad support.
Yeah, but how
So what
long
was
did
the
Halifax
percent
by
approval?
Design take to develop, and how many meetings there were? More than 6 months during the summer.
Yes, it took longer, and I agree with Dave Meslin that this is going to be a much longer process than we've had with it. And that the right thing was to push the pause button
So you'll campaign on it next time.
And they will be putting some resources into developing something.
I think the resources are going to go to the other elements of electoral reform.
So it's not pushing cause.
That's not-
It's pushing stuff, yeah.
That's stop.
That's not
cause.
strengthening our
Yeah.
democracy.
Because if you push pause, then the next campaign, you say, oh, we're gonna do electoral reform, and nobody trusts you.
Sorry, when I say push pause, I'm talking Dave Meslin is saying push pause. That's his.
Yeah, but you're saying push stop. You're saying we're focusing on the other
I think
elements.
cabinet has
Was
said push
Dave
stop.
Meslin,
Right.
I mean, is he the guru on electoral reform or something? Aren't you listening to other people? What about Fair Vote Canada and all the people around this room and in constituencies across this country? Is Dave Meslin somehow the
Of course,
only person you're listening to?
Listening to everybody, and as I said at the beginning, I completely honor and value the passion and the wisdom and the opinion and position of everybody in this room, rooms like it, wherever they are around the country. The government has to look at the country as a whole, and this it's something I liked your point about this is a meta issue. That's great language. This is a meta issue. the way we cast our votes is the foundation on which every other decision this or any government makes. And it's not one that can be done capriciously or by fiat because a leader said it in a campaign. It needs to have the support of Canadians across the country.
The way that, Andy, the way that voters cast their votes.
Unexpected outcome. I think that we were all a little surprised by to use a strong word, frankly, the disinterest of Canadians broadly. And then within the groups of people that were interested,
But I think that was manufactured. My version of that, it was manufactured. You started the consultations at the end of August or in the middle of the summer when, you know, families are getting ready to go to school and this, that, and the other. There wasn't really information out there. Frankly, I don't think the minister did a good job in terms of getting that information out there. There was the parliamentary legislative stuff going on at the same time as the town halls. It was very confusing to people. The whole rollout was very confusing to people in terms of which arm of the government was doing what, where the decisions would actually come from. Even the legislative committee that came here, I wanted to attend. It was very confusing as to who, you know, when the actual sessions were going. I ended up going in the evening when actually the thing was practically over. So I don't think the government did a really honest, good job of if as you say, and I agree, it's a very big issue, they didn't do a good and honest job of getting the word out there, of supporting the idea, or promoting it.
I noticed the shift in the government's tone on electoral reform right before the consultations started happening. It was a promise until right before the consultations started happening, and then it started being about consensus. Well, consensus wasn't the original issue, and really consensus doesn't really matter when you kind of rate the things that would give you consensus, and then it just like snowballed from there and went downhill. So I really think that the promise to begin with was not done in good faith. I don't think that that the intention in making that promise was ever to actually have to have 2015 be the last first past the post election. I really don't believe that. I don't buy into it. I think that was a trick, and I feel like we've been tricked. And so for your role going forward, I really think that it's important. I realize that the government has made this decision, right? That they're not gonna change the election system for the next election. Well, it's your job to stand up and work towards really putting this in place. If the issue right now is that there's that we're going too fast with it, then we need to figure out a way of doing this smarter. Sure, a little bit slower, but we need to figure out a way of doing this. We need to do it.
And if I could add,
Can I just, sorry,
Go ahead.
now we're shockingly over time a little bit here, so we kind of just need to wrap it up. I thought that was a beautiful way to end, but maybe if you have a final sort of thought there.
the last thing I just wanted to add from a strategic point of view that maybe your cabinet colleagues would listen to more forcefully than this is Canada boasts itself as being now, not even just Canada, the rest of the world looks to Canada as the only progressive government in the Western world. And that is deeply compromised now. And strategically speaking, the Conservatives are set to eviscerate you in the next election. The NDP are not really, there's no evidence that they have a leader. And I don't want to speak for anybody else. I don't think anybody here wants a Conservative government, but we can see the writing on the wall and the way in which they're presenting, I think rather intelligently, the betrayal of on electoral reform and other issues. So if Cabinet won't listen to what we're actually saying as points of principle, at least take back that strategic reality that the future of the last quote-unquote progressive government in the Western world is at stake. And that's a hell of a bad issue.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just want to say thank you for coming to see me today and for all the energy and time you put in this. And that is a very sincere expression of gratitude. I will push back a little bit on the misleading piece. I campaigned, as did every other Liberal MP, on the belief that we were going to engage Canadians in a process that would result in a change in the way we cast ballots. And I, like many of my fellow MPs, have to look at the evidence of what we see before us, what we hear with our ears, and as passionate as any one group or geographic area can be, there are many times more areas that are not that passionate. And we have to listen to that.
Here's my suggestion. As parliamentary secretary for democratic reform, you've put it together that this government's mission from here on out is to educate people and really put the wheels in motion to create a real dialogue and a climate that electoral reform can happen in. If you're saying that the issue is that there's no consensus, and that we can't do it right now, well, let's build a climate.
And that's a message as the MP that I can make back. So
Please do.
absolutely. Good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Grab some
Thank you.
Timbits
Thanks
on the
again.
way out, some coffee. There's lots of